Hey everyone, welcome back to another Pragmatic Talk Live. I'm Scott.
And I'm Susan.
And today we have an incredible guest for you. He's someone that we've known for well over a year. He's one of the smartest marketers that I know, and he's really helped us figure out how to make our messages clear and compelling for a B2B audience. So really, without further ado, let's bring in Zach. Zach, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys, you're making me blush.
Well, I mean, it's all true and all 100% warranted. Again, we've known Zach for well over a year, met him through LinkedIn, and it was probably through one of his posts that I reached out to him. And over the course of the year, we've done a lot of chats. We actually met for the first time in Charleston last year, and he's just a really great dude. And so, we wanted to bring him on and really help share him and his message with our audience. So, Zach, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. Thanks, Scott. So first, this is awesome. I'm so happy to do this. This is so cool. And, I'm rocking out my pandemic hair. I think Susan called it hockey hair. So
yep.
We got the locks in the back. So I spent 20 years in product marketing for B2B tech.
Yep.
And what that means is I was a translator. So I'm not a technical guy at all, but what I had to do is I had to understand a technology, a complex stuff, really deeply, be able to train a sales force so they could sell it, and be able to market it, create content, create messages, and market it to largely an executive buying audience that wasn't technical and didn't really care about all of the bells and whistles. So because I'm not technical, I came up with a way to do this really easily, to translate something that could be really complex or ambiguous and tough for people to understand, and translate it into words that people get, that really connect the core value of the offering to the core value of the audience and all the things in between. And now, so I was in the corporate world, like I said, for about 20 years. I jumped a little less than 3 years ago, and now I have a product marketing and messaging and positioning advisory service for founder-led companies and entrepreneurs. And I help people know what to say and how to say it so they make a bigger impact on the world and their wallets.
Yeah, quite frankly, what you do is outstanding. It's really getting you out of that, technical jargon mindset. And I think a lot of us, whether we're practitioners that start our own business, whether we are, established companies, we start to talk to people about our stuff and our technology and, why they should care. And what you really do is you help people kind of break through a lot of that and distill it down to its most basic essence and really, help people talk in a much more concise way that's relevant to their audience.
Well, and it's super important to do that because you hit it, especially when you're a founder and you have something that you love. It's your baby.
Right.
And you think everyone else should love it too. And you geek out over it. And of course you geek out over it. And when you geek out over it, though, you're only going to hit the people who share that passion for what you have and already get it. And you miss out on all of those people that aren't really aware that A, you exist,
right,
or B, they even have something that you or your product you're offering can help. So by getting down to the essence of the offer, it's really, it's a mentor of mine years ago. So I found a guy, or a guy found me, I guess, in marketing, in tech, and I was a young whippersnapper. I was a young product marketer on this team, and I was a few layers down from the CMO. And it was my first big product launch. I remember it was called SyncStream. It was this transcription thing. And I put together the start of it was really my first, I call it a sales pack, my first sales pack. And it was really sales enablement on messaging, diving down deep into the product and answering questions, answering what is it, what does it do, and why does it matter? Why does it matter to our target audience? And I did that for the product through all of the features, for the audience, for the market problems. And I delivered that to the sales team. And this guy saw it and he was blown away. And from that point on, I started getting all the big projects. And then when our company was sold, it was sold to 3M. And, we were, I remember I'll go on so many different tangents, Scott, if you just reel me in. So, some people were laid off. This guy moved on and come on, Zach. And he was a puller, and I worked with him for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things, getting back to now the original point, one of the things that he used to always say to me, because I'm a creative marketer, I love being creative. I love making things, creating things, get a reaction, seeing what happens, what sticks. But when you do product marketing, you have to worry about the product.
Yeah.
Now, I always say, and I believe this, no one gives a shit about your product until they do.
Right.
But you have to understand your product, your offering, your service, whatever it may be. You have to understand that deeply, and so deeply that you can talk about it from any perspective. And that's why getting down to the essence of things is so important.
Yeah.
When you can look at, when you understand so deeply what it is that you have, what it is, what it does, and why it matters to any particular audience, you can look at it, I'm use my phone, but you can look at it from any different angle and have know the right thing to say.
Yeah.
Well, and I think audience is key. Like, that is an important part of figuring out for that clarity, is how do I make sure that this is something that actually is not just something that sounds good, but it actually sounds good to the right people. And it's important
Absolutely.
to have that and resonate with them as opposed to what resonates in my own head.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. It's so funny. Like I often start out clients with this clarity, a clarity piece where we walk through those three questions. What is it? What does it do? Why does it matter? As you guys know, this is what we did.
Right.
But when I think about the buyer attraction formula, what causes people to be attracted to an offering and makes them want to buy? It doesn't start with the offer. The offer is right smack dab in the middle. It does. It starts with the audience. It goes from the audience, and it's not just knowing your audience anymore. It's not that you hear marketers talk about personas or avatars, that stuff is great, but it's make believe.
Right.
It's also watered down. It's pulling lots of pieces from lots of people and creating this fictional character, this fictional avatar. What's better these days is becoming your audience. And becoming your audience is still, it takes a lot of work. It's still doing all the things that you might do to build a buyer persona or build an avatar. But then it's also figuring out where your audience is and engaging there and interacting and becoming one with your audience. And this is why LinkedIn is so phenomenal, because you do this right in LinkedIn. You can do it in social media and Facebook, I don't know about Reddit groups. Reddit groups are kind of off the wall. But when you interact, you learn the nuances of the language. You understand the pain. You don't just know the challenges. You experience the challenges.
Right.
So it starts with audience. After audience, even before offer, is position. So we want to know for our offering, whatever that may be, we want to know how or define how we show up in our audience's mind. We want to define that. How do we want to show up? When somebody thinks of pragmatic digital, for example, what do you want them to think?
Right.
Well, this is getting into core values. So when we talked about before, we talked about connecting core values of the offer to core values of the audience. This positioning is understanding the core values of your offering. The value proposition, really.
Well, and it's so interesting because really our approaches are very, very similar. And so, we preach understanding what the business objectives are, what your audience is trying to achieve, and where those intersect is really where you should start and focus. And so whether it's your messaging, whether it's a voice solution, whether it's your website copy, whether it's video, like whatever, where those two things intersect is really where you should be focusing a bulk of your time. And I can tell you through a lot of agency experience that I've had, we're creating content for content's sake.
Yep.
And we're not really solving
sure.
the audience problem or the business challenge. And it's really been a volume game. And so I think it's critical that you get to that crux of it, of where it's appropriate for you to be providing content, solution, whatever, while you're understanding your audience.
Yeah, and I think there's also that whole idea of shiny and new messaging, like, oh, I'm bored with this one. Well, sorry, it's not about your boredom, because you've seen your message because you're writing it all the time. It's understanding that you have to keep reinforcing those things. And it's not about, spray and pray. It's about being consistent, because that's what's going to actually come through. When you talk about that perception, that's not developed overnight.
And that's so important. If there are company founders online right now and listening in, or listening later on the recording, that is so important. It's your baby. Of course, you love it so dearly, but what you think does not matter. What you think does not matter. What your audience thinks is what matters.
Right.
And I worked for a company, a big founder-led company. I mean, they're public now, and the founder was super, super bright guy, crazy successful company. And it was in spite of the messaging, because every single year at sales kickoff, every single year, he would put together a new message.
Yeah.
And it was his baby, and he wanted to do it, and he had trouble letting go, but he was changing the message every single year. And it's crazy to do that.
Yeah.
It's important to change your message, either proactively when you want to move your audience along to something else, or reactively when you see your audience has moved on to something else and you want to follow along with them.
Yeah.
But to do it just haphazardly because it's January, hey, we need a new message for 2021. No.
Well, and how often do we see sales and marketing have different messages? And so,
oh, for sure.
Once you start talking about larger organizations, even within that organization, there's a disconnect depending on who you're talking to. Like, customer service is saying something different than sales versus marketing. Mm-hmm. And so, a big part of what Susan has done in her career is figuring out how to, let's say it, unite the clans and actually get everyone kind of reading from the same hymnal. So we're actually using consistent language. Yep. It's the language of our audience. And ultimately, we're all driving in the same direction versus everyone kind of pushing in their various directions within their own silos.
Yeah, well, and it's important to do that, because then the materials that one team's creating can be used by another team. And holy crap, we can actually use resources to create new tools that are helpful. And instead of continually solving the same problem over and over and over again, it's like, we've solved this one, let's move on. Yeah. Imagine that, rather than,
exactly.
How many advertising campaigns try to solve the same problem over and over again?
Right.
Yeah, the best companies that I've worked for, we've always had, we used to call it the three-legged stool, but you had product, marketing, and sales all just connected. Yeah. Just walking lockstep. And it's always collaborative in those cases. Too often, and especially in tech. I work with tech companies now sometimes, not exclusively, but I see this especially in tech. It's common that you have sales and marketing, and they are diametrically opposed. Yep. And it's, you hear that and it's the complaints from sales, these leads from marketing are crap. And it's the complaints from marketing, these salespeople don't know anything. They're diving into features they don't know. Or they're making stuff up just to make the sale. That's a sign that sales and marketing aren't working together. Right. Both of those.
Right.
Yeah. And marketing gets treated like a 4-letter word a lot. Yeah. I think where it's sort of, you're coming up with these things that aren't even in touch with reality. Well, that's where sales can be your best friend and help you ground it in reality. And then that way, then you are making the right messages. But how many times through marketing do we find out these are the important features because we see what resonates by how people react to campaigns, or what people click on, or what people ask about. And so it's almost like free research that product doesn't need to necessarily do then. But the challenge is you guys, like you said, it has to be that stool. Because if it's not, then it's going to be everyone working in their own way and not sharing each other's intel. And that's a lot of wasted money when you think about it.
Yep.
I became a much better marketer the first time I went on a sales call. And even, I on LinkedIn, I saw someone post something over the weekend, talking about that when she became a much better marketer the first time that she had to pitch, and then she started seeking out sales pros in her company that would give her an opportunity to pitch. And that is just awesome. Yeah. Because you live in a bubble sometimes as a marketer, and you're not going to be as effective. It doesn't matter. We're talking about companies right now, but it doesn't matter if you're a company or if you're a solopreneur. It doesn't matter if you have one person in your company, 5 people in your company, or 500 or 5,000 people in your company. It doesn't matter. As a marketer, your role is to connect the offering to the audience. You can't do that if you don't know the offering and the audience. Oh, no.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that in various organizations I've done work with. There's a lot of, we have the customer at the center of everything we do, which is great PR and it feels really good. But at the end of the day, marketing generally is looking at data that's coming in, through their website, maybe some social, whatever. But a lot of times they're not going out and talking to their customers. They're not talking to their audience. They don't know the language that their audience is using, like the actual word choice. And so there's a massive opportunity as a smaller player and even mid-sized player to actually do the work that a lot of other folks aren't. Because the other part that happens a lot is, well, Hewlett-Packard's doing this, so we should just follow them. I'm sure they're doing it the right way.
Oh, God.
Once you actually get into the organization and you find out, well, they're not doing it any better than the next place. Yeah. So it's critical for you to actually do your own homework so you're better informed, and it just trickles down throughout the entire organization.
And it's not just talking to your best customers.
No.
It's talking to kind of your shitty ones, like the ones who are pissed off. Like, well, why are you pissed off?
And Help me understand. Just your customers either. It's not just exclusively your customers. Right. It's your prospects and your market. It's all of that.
Right.
And the dirty secret in marketing, and I certainly am guilty of this myself at times, even still. But the dirty secret in marketing is everybody says that they do audience research and they, we know persona, but nobody does it. Nobody does that. They don't. The ones that do, because those are the companies that absolutely kill it, and they connect with their customers, and they have this just heartfelt message that pulls people in.
Yep.
Or maybe not heartfelt. Maybe it's depending on the audience, but they laser in on what those cares are of their audience, the feelings that their audience want to achieve or want to avoid, and it's real. The problem is you can't fake that stuff. You used to be able to fake that stuff.
Yeah.
You can't fake that stuff anymore. You're smoked out immediately.
Yep. Well, and it's so easy to do the research now. Like, it's not 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, you had to really spend a lot of money, find a bunch of people, conduct your own research, conduct your own surveys, do focus groups, whatever. Like, now there's tools like SparkToro that exist. There's tools that allow you to actually just go in and observe conversations. This is actually kind of a funny story. When I was at Foot Cone and Belding years ago, really in the early days of Reddit, we were working on Kraft mac and cheese, and we were looking for new messaging. And I literally went into Reddit just to see what people are talking about. And there were all these like 30 and 40-year-olds that were like admitting that Kraft mac and cheese was a guilty pleasure of theirs. And so I basically pitched this idea of, you love it. Like, it's fine. Like, it's cool. Like,
it's okay.
But it was like from this like little nugget that I found on Reddit just by observing people like sheepishly admitting that when they have kids, I'll make one for them and I'll make one for me because I kind of miss having it. It's those types of insights that are just incredible, and it's easily gained as long as you spend enough time and you set aside the time to actually do it.
That reminds me actually of one of my clients. It's a company called Executive Networks, and they they run events. I mean, it's live. It's all virtual now, but live and virtual events with an online community, really online communities for HR pros, the senior most HR pros in the world's biggest companies. And it's pretty ambiguous. You think about that. It's super, super targeted. But how do you talk about community? And then it's executive networks. It sounds like it could be something technical, but it's not. It's networking, but not networking.
Right.
So how do you get to this? Well, to do this, and we answered those 3 questions and did a lot of work with them. But I interviewed their customers. I sat in on their sales calls. I asked about objections. I listened in on not just one-to-one sales meetings, but they did some cold calls. They did some cold emails, and I'm listening in on their and watching their outbound and reactions that they're getting and everything. And one line kept coming back, which is, I feel like I'm all alone. I feel like I'm all alone because who can I talk to as a senior, a chief human resources officer for a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate? There's no one for me to talk to.
Right.
Because if I talk to the CEO or the executive team doesn't get what I'm doing. They don't understand what I'm up against, and I can't share everything. If I talk to my team, well, it's my team, and they're reporting to me. I can't share everything there, and I feel like I can't share certain vulnerabilities there.
Right.
I have no one to talk to, and so I have this very small group of people that I trust, and that's it. And if you're not in that group, well, then forget it.
Right.
And that's what kept coming up. And so the words that we ended up using was leave the island, find your people. And it opened everything up for them because instantly that just spoke to the audience. And it's so simple.
Yep.
It's the HR island. And we tested that on the audience, and it was like, yes, that's it. And things just went from there. And now, I mean, you go to their website and you see, leave the island, find your people.
Right.
This is the end.
That's awesome.
That wouldn't have happened without the audience work, though.
Right. Right.
It wouldn't have happened.
Right. And it's, again, it's not, as my former colleague used to say, it's not rocket surgery. It does take some time to identify the trends and the topics and the language and all that stuff. But once you do, you can speak in such a more concise, intelligent way that really, truly resonates with your audience. Connects. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so I think to that end, I know you also recently did something with a group called Speakers Who Dare. And I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to talk a little bit about your experience with Speakers Who Dare.
That was
so
great.
Can you
Speakers
talk?
Who Dare is awesome. Yeah, Speakers Who Dare was awesome. I was kind of bummed out. It was, well, I'll get to that. So Speakers Who Dare is a platform for people with world-changing messages, and it's kind of a combination between a TEDx and a Broadway show. And the women that put it on are just powerhouses. Trisha Brook and Jamie Broderick. So Trisha is a producer, director, writer, choreographer. I always tell when I'm explaining who she is to friends, I always say, well, the picture of Trisha on Internet Movie Database is with Susan Sarandon and James Gandolfini at some award show. Like she is hot shit. Like she is the real deal. And so I auditioned for it. You had to audition. And it was going to be, it's a live show in New York at a theater off Broadway, and it was supposed to be March 26th. Well, right at the beginning of the pandemic here in the States, and we were a full go, and then we were, okay, only the speakers are going to be there. We're not going to have an audience. And then New York City shut down all the theaters, and it was, well, now why don't we just video this? Everybody video your talk. You can be as creative as you want, and I'm going to create a film. And that's what she did. She took these files and worked with a professional editor and created the Speakers Who Dare film, which is on YouTube now. and it was awesome. But so my message was about it's really the key to communications. It's important to be heard.
Yeah.
And I tied it back to the xylophone. I like to say clear, the best business communication is clear, compelling, and convincing. And clear means you're understood. Compelling means you grab attention and you hold on to it. And convincing is you inspire or you otherwise motivate your audience to take action.
Right.
And that's what the xylophone is. So that's what I did. I played the xylophone and demonstrated all those things. I mean, it's kind of like, yeah. So like, for example, like it's a xylophone. So already it's compelling because it's like, what the hell is this thing? But you think of the song Flight of the Bumblebee. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah,
sure,
hear you fine.
Great. So you think of the song Flight of the Bumblebee, and I am way out of practice right now. So, but Flight of the Bumblebee is this crazy complex song, right? I mean, I can't even play it anymore. But it's not. It's super ridiculously simple. Because if I play that same stanza that I just did, look how simple this is. It's so simple. But when you master simplicity, it's remarkable. And that was the three things that I covered were that it's being simple. So the key to being clear is to be simple. To be compelling, to stand out, well, the xylophone stands out. I mean, but just being compelling isn't enough because it's compelling. I mean, it's different. It's compelling. But alone, that's not enough. And then convincing is taking on the perspective of my audience. And so, what I said was, maybe you're not a Rimsky-Korsakov fan. I should play this too. Maybe you're more into Bach. See, I haven't done this in a while either. But maybe you're not a Rimsky-Korsakov fan. Maybe you're more into Bach. Or vintage, I don't even remember. It was like vintage Broadway. I don't remember it. But the point being, if you know your audience and you know what their preferences and you know what they like, what they love, what they want to hear and what they need to hear,
yep,
then you're going to have a better time connecting with them and you're going to be more convincing. They're going to want to take action. The buyer is in control of every buying interaction these days. Sellers think they are,
right,
but we're not. We're not.
And we haven't been for quite a long time either.
Yeah. I think the thing is too is that when you start talking about your message, like as you were talking about the different styles of whether I want to hear Tchaikovsky or if I do want to hear Blink 182, that all dependent on my message. So messages also give you the freedom to say no, which is a really important thing as a founder, also as an organization of these are the boundaries. And I'm not saying no to make it personal. I'm saying no because it doesn't align with our message. And so that takes some of that personalness out of it, but then keeps you honest and keeps you consistent.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and I'd like to switch gears for a second because I did kind of prompt this story on some of my LinkedIn posts, and we haven't had a chance to get to it. So, so last fall we were down in Charleston.
Find the picture.
While you're pulling that up, last fall we were in Charleston for Kurt Mercadante's Freedom Festival, and Zach actually was there, which is great. It was the first time we actually had a chance to see him in person. And so we met out at a bar, had a bourbon drink of some sort. I believe it was an old fashioned.
Yep. And
then we went to this restaurant, a very famous restaurant in Charleston called Poogan's Porch. And for those of you that don't know, Poogan's Porch has the reputation to be a haunted food establishment. And so it's in this beautiful old home, but there's allegedly the lady that lives upstairs who haunts the upstairs area. And then there's also Poogan, who is the resident dog of the home that was alive back in the 1970s. And so we met Zach for dinner that night, and we were having a great time. And then this kind of funny thing happened. So I'd love for you to share what we actually did see.
Oh my gosh. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. I can't find the picture right now. It's not worth trying to find. I can share it on a post later maybe. But so I love biscuits. I love them. There's just something about biscuits, like good Southern biscuits. And of course, this place is a Southern restaurant. They have biscuits.
Right.
So I have all these biscuits. It's great. I'm a messy biscuit eater. So stuff falls down. There was a little piece on the floor and it fell. And I said, oh, excuse me. And I said, oh, wouldn't it be funny if the dog ate the biscuit? And we laughed, ha, 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 ha. And then it's towards the end of the night. And I look down and, oh my God, it's gone. And no one has been there. Like there's a little mess there. It looks like a dog or something ate and licked up the floor. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Now, could I have hit it with my boot? Maybe, but probably not. I mean, it was really closer to, my butt than my foot. Could someone have walked over there and stepped on it? Maybe, but nobody really walked around us.
Yeah. No.
So it was just like,
well,
oh my gosh. And I am not, or at least I should say was not a believer in supernatural stuff like that. But that was mind blowing, man. Oh my gosh.
Well, I just remember the look on your face when you looked up and you're like, guys, it's gone. And we're like, ha ha ha, real funny, Zach.
Like, it was crazy.
And then we look under the table
look.
Yeah. Well, and you picked your shoes up to show like it is not on my feet. We all looked on our own feet to be like, I don't know, did one of us step on it?
It was nuts.
And it wasn't there.
It was nuts.
And the best part was then when we told them, our server, and said, hey, so this happened, and she said, oh, thank goodness he picked it up. I hate it when they drop it and I have to clean up after him. And that's kind of
it was just so nonchalant.
Yeah, as if the thing is when we talk about the reputation about this place being haunted, it's not a secret.
No.
And they were sort of like, well, good for you. You got to meet Poogan. And
it was crazy.
That was not our goal.
That was crazy.
Yeah, it was
really cool.
And much like you, like I was never a believer in any of that type of stuff. And I can attest that we saw something I cannot explain. And that's just kind of how I have to leave it. Because it's... There's no explanation for what happened.
That was crazy. It was super fun, but that was crazy.
Yeah, it was.
It was a great weekend, actually. I'm glad Kurt actually did that.
Learned
a lot, met a lot of great people. So,
and someday we'll all get back together again at events and have crazy things like that happen.
Yeah.
And until then, we get to have technology like this.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, so I do want to share for our audience that you've been incredibly kind and actually have a bit of a special offer that you would like to offer the folks either watching this live or listening to this on the replay. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Well, let's talk a little about that Finding Clarity session. So in fact, I'm going to toss it back to you guys. Why don't you talk a little about this Finding Clarity session? Because that's kind of what this offer revolves around.
Yeah.
So the finding is, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this, it's getting to the essence of your offering. And it's answering 3 questions. What is it? What does it do? And why does it matter to my target audience? And it's remarkably simple. And it's not so easy to do, especially by yourself.
Yeah.
So for typically what these sessions are, it's 60 minutes, and we go through these questions. And for everyone here who is listening in, I'm going to boost that to 90 minutes. So it's a 90-minute session. We'll go through these 3 questions. At the end, what you end up with is remarkably clear and frankly compelling content, or messaging that you can use on a website, that you can use on social posts, that you can use on sales collateral if you do that sort of thing, that you can use in sales conversations, and pull these snippets out. And it just gives you a much deeper understanding of your offering. You get to the essence, and you can talk about it more clearly and in a more compelling way from any perspective.
Yeah. And we're communications professionals. This is what we do for a living. We came to Zach because we were just too damn close to our own business, the value proposition, the technology. And so we found ourselves falling right back in the trap that we always find ourselves in, and we tell clients not to do. But we worked with Zach to really identify at the core, here are the core messages of Pragmatic Digital. Here's the things that people, your prospects, will actually care about. And it's influenced our social media posts, our social ads, content that we put out, really just everything that we do, our website. And it really helped us get to the crux of what we were trying to say. But we always, added a few extra words in, and it wasn't necessarily as clear as it could be or as concise as it could be.
Or we always wanted to, we're at all that in a bag of chips, and it was good because we got back to just being that important bag of chips.
Right. And
making sure that was understood. And the thing I want to call out too is, so as most people know, I'm a big content freak. We all know that that's what's really important to not just voice experiences, but all. And the thing is that when we start with our clients, what we start with are fundamentals such as this.
Yep.
And we know that I would love to say all of you show up with that all perfect. You don't, and that's okay. Here is a way to get to that, so that then you can start figuring out, where do I need to have experiences that are going to deliver, or that means something, or actually are worth the effort of creating them in the first place. And this is like Zach's process is incredibly helpful at getting at those things, so that then you can build. These are really important foundational building blocks.
That's the word right there, foundations. This is all foundations. And it's funny because when I started out doing my own thing and taking all the stuff that I learned from the 20 years in product marketing, it was difficult because it's foundational and it works. This stuff works for everything.
Yep.
And, I decided to focus in more on founder-led companies because I dig working with people who are passionate, who have amazing ideas that can do some good for an industry or for the world even. I mean, that sounds kind of goofy to say the world, but I'm serious.
Yeah.
It's there's a purpose usually behind being a founder. You have something you care so deeply about, but it's hard to articulate it without getting back to the basics and the foundations of these things.
Yeah.
They say go back to the basics, and it's because the basics work, and we all forget that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, your offer and work with you on that. What's the URL that they can visit?
Oh, sure. So there is a bit.ly link. It's bit.ly or bit.ly/getsuperclear. And that'll drive you to a page where you get a little more information about it.
Yeah.
And you can schedule it.
Yeah, it's something that we did. It was something we had always intended to do. And I think, Zach, I even mentioned this to you. I wanted to do that early on. We just didn't have the right opportunity to pull the trigger and actually work with you on it. But I am so glad that we did. Yep. It really helped us hone in on the essence of what we should be talking about when we're talking about this whole new technology. And you've really helped us, get super focused, laser focused on what those messages are that'll resonate with our audience.
That's awesome. And we had a good time too.
Always.
I mean,
super fun.
And that's the thing, like working with you is just, this is you. Like, this isn't just a persona. This is literally, when you work with Zach, this is literally how he is. And he always brings the boom shakalaka. So
boom shakalaka. Yeah. Well, can I tell you one more story?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about this before we started here. So it's actually 5 years ago today. So I was working at this company, and I was being told the CMO was telling me to use, you need to say this or you need to say that. And I knew it was the wrong messages to put out to market, but I was a good corporate citizen. And so I was doing what I was told. And at the same time, I was being yelled at. I was being pushed down, and I was ready to quit. And 5 years ago, actually today, I wrote something. I woke up in a cold sweat, no exaggeration, in the middle of the night, and I was panicky and really unhappy. And I wrote something. I figured out the key to the universe. You can read it on my LinkedIn profile. Search Zach Messler. I think it's linkedin.com/in/Zach Messler. It's called The Key to the Universe. And it's really just two things. It's do the right thing. So the idea behind that is, if you're good at your job, if you're good at what you do, if you have a sense of ethics, then you know what the right thing to do is in any situation. So just do it. And number two is, don't be afraid of the repercussions. So if you do the right thing and something bad happens, so what? What's the worst thing that happens if you do the right thing? It's probably not as bad as you think it's going to be, but what's the best thing that happens? And so instead of just writing about that, I started living that way. And it was from that moment. I used to have corporate Zach and Zach, like home and work. And there were two very different people. And I stopped doing that. And I just started living. I hate to say it this way because it's so overused, but I lived my genuine life. I lived my authentic, I was my authentic self wherever I went. And that's when things started blowing up in a good way. I mean, all the yelling stopped. I built these unbelievable relationships with salespeople. I was able to do all of the things that I knew were right because I didn't care anymore what happened. I found I was able to stay calmer and cooler in more intense situations because I knew I had done the right thing. And then things just cleared out. And look, sometimes you find out that you're wrong. Yes, sometimes you find out that you're wrong. Yeah. But and that's fine. Again, if you have that sense of ethics, what's wrong is not going to be really wrong. It's just you're going to find it didn't work.
Right.
But once I started living that way, life became easier. I'm me. This is what you get. What you see is what you get.
Yeah. Well, and having two different personas, work persona and home persona, is exhausting. And I think for sure. And I think a lot of people that are out there right now, whether they are still working or they're between jobs or whatever, I think a lot of people, because of the COVID situation, are reevaluating their life. And it's almost like we're all having where, just through force of the situation, we're kind of taking stock of our life. And I think, we all have this epiphany at different stages in our life, but I think for us, we had the same kind of a thing happen. And I couldn't applaud you more for recognizing it, but actually just deciding this is how I'm going to be and this is how I'm going to live.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I haven't been able to. I haven't worn these in a long, long time, but I have a pretty cool collection, if I do say so myself, of Oxfords, of two-tone Oxford shoes. And I have a buddy and I'll wear them wherever. Like I'll wear them all the time. And I had a buddy say to me, "Oh man, I could never get away with those." Like, why not? Why can't you just wear the frickin' shoes if you like them and you think they're cool?
Right.
Then just do it. Oh, I couldn't ever do that. And I think that I couldn't ever do that. I mean, this ties back to being compelling. So clear, compelling, convincing. The key to being compelling, creating compelling communications, isn't being creative. Being creative helps.
Sure.
But it's having the guts. It's having the guts to do something.
Yeah.
Or having the guts to do something different.
Yeah.
I mean, for Pete's sake, I use boom shakalaka as a hashtag, and I have an emoji signature on my frickin' profiles. Like, who cares? It's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And if people, this is another audience thing too. If somebody doesn't like my approach, great. That's fine. Because I'm doing this stuff to attract people that I want to work with.
Right.
And so if seeing boom shakalaka, if seeing an emoji, if really conversational, sometimes slang type language isn't your thing, well, then we shouldn't work together.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Right.
Yeah, I actually had there was someone who fairly successful person with an established brand who was talking to me about trying to make, convincing someone to work with her. And she said, well, I use the data, and if the data doesn't work, then I try this. And I said, you know what? There are times you are going to be too much for someone, and you're going to be too much for some people. And you know what? They're not your people, and that's okay. And that person looked at me with a shocked look and said, no one ever explained it to me like that. Like, yeah, and I'm like, and it's okay. Like, I think I spent a lot of time telling people things like that where it's, and it ends with, and that's okay. Because it's permission to do that just as much as I'm probably the more conservative of the three of us here in this group. That's kind of known. And the thing is so it's fine because that's my personality. And if I tried to be a boom shakalaki-y silly person, it wouldn't be any more genuine than if you tried to be corporate.
It's not you.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the important
not you.
essence. It's not just about I'm going to be fun for fun's sake. It's if that's who you are, or I'm not saying I'm not fun, by the way. I just thought I'd make that clear. But that type of thing is an important thing, and that's where you get into that message and that clarity because that also helps you inject that into there. And if there is swagger, fine.
Yeah.
You can have swagger. It's okay. You got to earn that swagger, but it's important to get
That's
to
right.
those essences.
Well, we're so afraid to not have everyone in the world want to work with us.
Yeah.
That, we kind of put on airs or a persona, but it's actually, you hit the nail on the head. You want to have people self-select. Like, you don't want to talk to a bunch of people that are going to have a problem with your approach or going to have a problem with, the way your messaging is or whatever. Like, you just don't want to deal with that. And so, especially as a founder starting out, like, it's a scary prospect to say, all right, 35% of the population, I'm not even going to worry about talking to. Because it seems like you're giving up opportunity, but what you're really doing is you're diluting yourself and you're focusing on the wrong things. When you actually cut that part of your audience out and you focus on the folks that you really want to work with, then that's where the magic happens. And so, again, I think it's a great approach on your part to say, hey, these are the types of people I want to work with. Here's the kind of people I want to attract. And quite frankly, it's what attracted me to you.
That's awesome. Well, it works.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is you don't want to misrepresent who you are and what you do and how you show up. So if I were to become much more buttoned up, that's not going to represent how you interact with me because I'm not buttoned up.
Yeah.
No.
And then it's man, this goes back to the clear, compelling, convincing thing again. Because if you are compelling, convincing. No, if you are compelling and convincing, but not clear, then you have a bunch of pissed off customers because they have bought something that isn't what they thought.
Right.
And it's the same thing. If I'm showing up a certain way that I'm not, and then people get on the inside and see that I'm very different than how I was advertised, well, what's the good in that? I'm going to piss people off.
Yeah. And that's really, really any point in your company's maturity, but especially early on, that's like literally the last thing you want to do. That's the difference between survival and not when you're starting out.
Yeah. I mean, there's two ways to grow a company.
Sure.
You can take everyone who walks in the door and wants to work with you, and you probably end up losing money the first few years because you're exhausted emotionally from pretending or dealing with people who you didn't want to work with in the first place. Or you can be super choosy, and yes, there's going to be nights where you're laying in bed going, all right, we'll figure out runway tomorrow. But tonight, I've got at least 12 more hours.
Freak out.
But the reality of it is part of the reason we founded our own thing, and sound similar to you, was I was tired of having to work with those personalities of going, that person, but they're the client. Well, wait a minute. No, I'm done with that. And I'm not saying that, I'm not even going to name names, but like you have to deal with that because that's part of being in an agency services environment, even in a corporate environment. This is the only time when you're a founder that you can say, I'm doing this because this is what my passion is and this is what aligns with it. And I get to say yes or no because it's my mortgage that's on the line, not everyone else's. Yeah,
that's exactly right. It's funny. If I ever get to, I don't do proposals. I just don't. And I used to, but if I got to a point where it was clearly a company that it could have been a great contract, but if it was clearly something that I was going to regret in the beginning, early on, I'd just take it. Yes. Oh, wow. It's this much money. Great. That's awesome. And I don't do that anymore. I mean, I don't really, like I said, I don't really do proposals anymore, but I'm not going to work with a company or an individual if we're not jiving. If it's not right, I don't want to deal with it.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those new business pitches, it's just like, and I think that in our today's job seeker gets a little more leeway in the idea of when you're interviewing, it's not just an interview of you're interviewing the company. And some of those red flags that are deal breakers will present themselves. It's up to you whether or not you're going to do something about them or make that negotiation. Yep. But it is understanding. It's the same thing like when we meet with clients or whenever you meet with anything. It's, can I work with this person? Do I want to work with this person? Those are important questions to ask because you're giving a part of yourself. And you know, it's the old saying, you can't find the right person if you're with the wrong one. It's important to make sure that you've got that sorted.
Yeah.
For sure. Totally agree.
Well, Zach, this has been awesome. We went a lot longer than I thought we would, but I mean, I think we...
Shocker,
right? But I think we covered just a ton, and there's so much here, so much rich stuff here for founders and, you know, really a lot of folks that, you know, we talk to that, you know, you want to talk to. And so thank you so much for taking the extended time to talk to our audience. Oh, sure.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Are there any questions out there? I can't see anything.
We have an error on the comments. So, of course, halfway through, the comments stopped working. So I don't know if there are comments or not.
All right.
We'll come back and answer them.
I'll tell you what. If you're listening, if you're watching, and you have questions, shoot me a note on LinkedIn, or you can reach me at Zach, Z-A-C-H, at zachmessler.com. And shoot me a question. I'd be happy to answer your question.
Awesome. And we'll add all the contact information and everything else that we talked about today in the show notes. So if you're listening to this or you want to listen to this on the podcast or whatever, we'll have all the links in there for you. Awesome.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, with that, we're going to close out this episode of Pragmatic Talk. We will be back probably in the next couple weeks with another interview, talking to marketers and people in marketing about marketing stuff. And so for now, I'm Scott.
And I'm Susan.
And we will catch you next time.